Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Johnson, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Musicological Society. And I'm excited to welcome you to our new JAMS author interview series. Today, I'm joined by Catherine A. Bradley, who is an associate professor in early music at the University of Cambridge, to discuss her article, Singing in Stimmtausch, circa 1100 to 1350, Repositioning Polyphony in Medieval France, which you can find in the spring 2025 issue of the Journal of the American Musicological Society, volume 78, issue 1. Catherine, welcome today. I wondered if we could begin with you just giving a brief summary of the topic of your article and your argument.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jake. So the article is really about a single melody that has, in a way, a very simple construction. So basically, it goes up the octave and then it goes down the octave, and it just repeats those two phrases over and over again. But the exciting thing about it is that you can combine those two phrases to sound against one another in polyphony, where they cross the octave in contrary motion. And that technique is called Stimmtausch, or voice exchange, because the two phrases just get swapped between two voices, and it makes polyphony that sounds the same for every phrase, but two different singers are singing either the rising phrase or the falling phrase. And the reason that I got fascinated by this one particular example of this kind of practice, which it's a melody, but of course you can sing it as a melody, but you can also, if you've got a friend, you can make polyphony. Um, and this particular melody is really unusual because it survives already. There are traces of it from the late 11th century, so from the late 1000s, and it's still being written down around 1700. And it travels all across Europe. It's in sources from England, Denmark, France, Spain, Italy, German speaking lands, Bohemia. So it's obviously a melody that people really loved, both singing and writing down. And so that fascinated me to begin with. But then the other thing that I got interested in was the fact that this particular melody, and indeed this kind of practice, which we sometimes call simple, is basically totally absent from music histories, even though it's really, really prevalent in surviving sources. So I wanted to think about why that is, and that was partly sparked by the fact that I found two records of this particular Stimmtausch melody, recorded in very complicated measured notation in late 13th century polyphonic sources. And because the piece looked like complex polyphony, no one realized that it was actually this really simple melody. So that also made me think about the politics of notation for us as scholars. So when we see something in a complex notation, we kind of react to it differently, but also maybe for people in the Middle Ages, because I think this notation, rhythmic or not, has a kind of prestige for them. And the other thing that was really fascinating was these two rhythmically notated versions of the melody as polyphony, which hadn't been noticed before. They actually contradicted one another in their rhythmic details. So that kind of made me realize, like, okay, this is a practice that doesn't have a kind of fixed or strict rhythm, but these people chose to write it down in this way. Why did they do this? And I began to realize, well, there might actually be more traces of these kind of simple practices hiding in plain sight in complex notation that we haven't realized, because we sort of take the notation at face value. And I also began to realize, well, actually, this kind of polyphony, these kinds of melodies, they're absent from the sources that are really central to our music histories. So in the 13th century, that's the super beautiful, super complex books of polyphony from Notre Dame in Paris. They never write this kind of polyphony down. Well, they actually do once, but we didn't realize that. But anyway, they normally don't. And I think that that was actually a political choice in many cases, that actually this kind of music making maybe was perceived as a bit simple in its own time. So yeah, that was kind of the impetus of the article. I wanted to think about this one melody and tell its story. And I also wanted to think about how we are kind of historiographically conditioned and prejudiced, and how maybe even the medieval sources have this sort of prejudice written into them themselves, and then how we can kind of see behind this incredibly complex polyphony, which for us we consider normal and that's all we study, to this kind of more day-to-day, more widespread, more normal musical practices that obviously in the Middle Ages we just don't have so many written traces of.
There's some real sleuthing in this story, and I love the way it unfolds like a detective story. It's such a fascinating and engaging read. It really is. So, can you share a little bit, Catherine, about what most fascinated you, or maybe a couple of things about your article's topic and area of research that really drew you into this?
Well, I mean, I think you've kind of just said it. I love doing this kind of like sleuthing detective sort of work. I love figuring out puzzles and realizing connections that people just hadn't seen. So that's often what drives my work in the first place. And I think this turned into such a rich topic because I kind of got on, as so often happens, I kind of got onto it by mistake because I got really interested in this melody. And then I thought, oh, I'll just track down the various sources. And then I realized that that was just this absolutely gigantic can of worms. And at that point, you can decide to either run away or dig in. And just actually the practice of finding these sources and then the places that I found this music turning up that I wasn't expecting to. Yeah, it was really challenging. And actually, with the article, I think JAMS articles have long processes of gestation and rewriting. So yeah, it became a very different article from what I expected in the beginning, and that's of course part of the joy of the whole enterprise. And of course, it's just amazing that there are still so many new discoveries to be made about music that is so old. Part of that is facilitated now by the fact that there are so many manuscripts available online. You get a couple of clicks and you can just check something that somebody in the 1950s couldn't possibly have checked. So that opens up the field of discovery, and there's so many new sources being discovered through these kind of digital searches. So yeah, I tapped into a really rich seam of material. And I mean, yeah, there's plenty more scope to do that kind of thing for other people. If you just find a melody like this from the Middle Ages and want to try and track down all the sources, you're going to learn some stuff, I think, that you didn't expect to, and that's kind of pretty challenging in some ways.
Oh, 100%, really, absolutely. So this is a related question then. Like, would you tell us a little bit about how your article extends maybe existing knowledge in musicology or a subfield or maybe a different discipline altogether about when it comes to discussions about this kind of music?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's been really productive because it challenges the kind of dominant historiographical mode, which includes my own dominant mode of scholarship. So previously, I've always worked on this super complex polyphony from Paris, and I've treated it like most musicologists do, as if that's the kind of normal music of the day. But of course, what I've understood by seeing many different types of sources and discovering connections that I didn't expect to find, like it contextualizes my own work on a type of music that's totally atypical in a way. So I feel like it challenges my own scholarly biases. And also, I've been looking at sources and a type of music that's considered in a way peripheral, but the more I look at it, the more I realize that it's the center that's atypical, and it's the periphery which is giving us this kind of picture of music making in the past that we is much harder to see and much harder to talk about because having this label of simple polyphony, that immediately, in a way, discourages people from engaging with it analytically, and maybe the kinds of analytical methods that you can apply to complex polyphony, super complicated textual interpretation, multiple voices, lots of rhythmic complexity. You can't do that with simple polyphony. So you need to find, well, I don't really believe it's simple, obviously, or I believe that if it's simple, that simplicity is part of its power, actually. But so we need to find new ways of talking about that in a way that kind of makes it valid for musicology and music history. And I'm still figuring that out, but working with this one melody has been a way into doing that.
Wow, what a powerful and poetic idea. Uh, I just love the implications of a simple or small melody having these really profound meanings and interpretations. And your article just fleshes this out quite beautifully. So the last question for our time together, Catherine, is I would like you to reflect on what you think a student or maybe somebody who's brand new to musicology, what they might take away from your article, or what you hope they might take away from your article.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it because there is a lot of detail in the article, so I hope they're not put off by that. But I hope what they might take away from it is, well, first of all, this kind of joy of the archive, which now, of course, is available to you in several clicks from your computer. The joy of discovery and just the sheer potential of things and information that is still out there to find if you want to work on early music. There's so much we still don't know. There's so many sources that haven't been properly studied or looked at. So if you're a student, it's actually not that hard to find or to ask someone to help you to find a manuscript that you could work on, and you might be the first person to work on it. You could just figure out what's in there. You could kind of follow some of the leads out. And I think you would probably be able to find something really quite radically new and powerful. So yeah, I mean, I hope, JAMS, obviously it's amazing to be published in JAMS. It's kind of, the premier musicological journal. So I'm really happy that early music is represented there. And I hope it sends a message that this is still such a dynamic field with so much potential for discovery and for fun. I mean, it's so rewarding to work on, and you don't have to find your niche among all the things that have already been done. There's lots of kind of uncharted terrain for you to explore.
Well, the fun is contagious, and if you read Catherine's essay, you'll definitely follow in that vein of thinking as well. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us for these few minutes today, and thank you for following along. Be sure to check out Catherine Bradley's essay, along with some other fabulous articles and reviews in the JAMS Volume 78, Issue 1, which is available through the University of California Press. Thank you, Catherine. Happy
Thank
reading.
you, Jake. Thank you.